Okay, welcome back to part two. We left off with the well sites, the loggers building the well sites, and of course my surveyor and I deciding where the best place to put a well was. So we got those done. The loggers had built the well sites, and I'm thinking, I don't know anything about the permitting process. So I just assumed they had permits for these things, and but they didn't. So I had said, when are you guys going to start drilling a well? And it was kind of a comedy at the time, because Mike Smith, when I could get a hold of him, because 99.999% of the time, when you called his cell phone number, you got the mailbox has never been set up message. And so you could never leave a message for Mike Smith. It was the only number I had for him. So anyway, but I had called and called and called. Finally got him, when are you going to drill a well? And he's like, well, they're going to be there in 2 weeks to drill a well. Okay. So 2 weeks, I would show up in Kentucky, because by that point I'd come back to Toledo. So I would drive from Toledo, Ohio to Bell County, Kentucky. It's like 400 some miles. And for them to come in and drill a well. And this happened like 3 times. I'd show up there and there'd nobody drilling nothing. And I was starting to get really pissed. And I called Mike Smith after the 3rd time, and I said, what the hell's going on? You told me your guys were going to be there to drill a well. I drove down from Toledo, and there's no well being drilled. Well, we're having a hard time getting a permit. And I'm like, you don't have a freaking permit? Well, my brother's screwing me. And I'm like, how long is it going to take you to get a permit? You ain't got a freaking permit? And he's like, we're working on it. It's going to be soon. Well, he jacked me around with this story for probably another week or so, and then I got frustrated one day, and I said, shit, and I actually called, it was the Mines and Minerals, and it was the Division of Oil and Gas. So Department of Mines and Minerals, Division of Oil and Gas. And I asked to speak to somebody in permitting. So I got a hold of this woman in permitting, and I told her who I was and where my land was at and who the company was that was going to be drilling the wells, and I asked her, I said, what's going on with the permits? And she said, we're not issuing permits to Target Oil and Gas or Mike Smith. And I was like, oh my God. You're what? And she said, we're not issuing any permits to them. I said, why? And she said, well, they have 10 violations against them. And until they get those straightened out, we're not issuing any permits. I'm like, you're shitting me. Well, that ain't what Mike Smith told me. Of course it's not what Mike Smith told me, because Mike Smith told me it was all his brothers doing. Never mentioned that he had 10 freaking violations against him. Okay, we're going to skip a little bit fast forward on this. Mike Smith manages to get a permit. Wasn't the right permit, but it was a permit. So he says to me, he says, look, I got a company coming on this date. They're going to be there. Scout's honor. I said, all right. I said, Mike, they better be there, because I'm going to drive back down from Toledo again. Sure enough, I get down there. Here's this company. It's called, the company was called Phoenix Drilling. This company was an A1 company, first rate. I can't say enough good about this company. These guys were awesome. Because a lot of people don't realize these oil and gas companies, they subcontract everything. They don't, they don't do anything themselves. They subcontract it. Kind of like a general contractor that builds a house but never swings a hammer. Same difference. So anyway, this company comes and they're setting up, and I went and I introduced myself to them. And they said, well, where's Target at? And I said, I'm guessing they're coming. They know, they told me you were going to be here, so I'm guessing that they're going to be here. And, there was no Target. Well, then Mike Smith's brother, Greg, shows up. And, he shows up. I introduced myself to him. Real pleasant guy. Mike Smith and his brother, Greg, really, they come off as really nice guys. They really, really do. So Greg says to me, he says, hey, he goes, where's a good place to eat around here? And I said, I gave him 3 or 4 different places, and he said, well, I'm going to go grab something to eat, I'll be back. Greg didn't come back for 3 days. 3 freaking days. Greg did gone. No Mike Smith, nobody from Target, no Greg Smith, nobody, just, I'm the only one there. So they're setting up their stuff, and they're like, hey, where'd that dude from Target go? I said, he went to go get something to eat, he'll be back. And they're like, well, do you have any geology? I said, I don't have any geology. And I said, but I'm sure he just went to go get something to eat, he'll be back. They're like, well, all right, and they're setting their cadence and set off. Listen, when they're drilling well, they bring a lot of equipment. In fact, they came in first shift. They didn't even start drilling anything until second shift. So second shift's there, and they start to drill, and the rig operator comes up to me and says, hey, he said, where's the company man? I said, he went to go get something to eat about 5 hours ago. And they're like, well, we got to have some geology. Do you have any geology? I said, well, I don't have any geology. I said, I have something I think might be geology. I said, I'll tell you what, hang tight, and I'll go check and see what I have. So I get on my four-wheeler, and I head down to the house. And what I had was a copy of the application for the permit. I managed to get my hands on that. So it had something on there that looked like geology, so I drove it back up the mountain, and I got with the guy. I said, here's the geology that I have. And he looked, he goes, this is not what I'm looking for. This is not helping me. He goes, I need something. And I said, well, Mike Smith will be back. I said, just keep on keeping on. He said, all right. So they're drilling. No Mike Smith, no Greg Smith. They're drilling. So the next day, I come back up. First shift guys were there. And they're like, we have no geology and we cannot get a hold of Mike Smith. And he said, do you have any number that we can get a hold of him at? And I said, no, I don't. I said, all I have is a cell phone number. And he said, well, what number is that? And I gave him the number, and he said, that's the same number we have. Okay. So they have no geology. Guy tells me flat out, he goes, we're wildcatting. He goes, I have no instruction, no nothing. He goes, we're wildcatting. I said, well, let's hope this works out. He goes, you should be very thankful that I have a lot of experience. He goes, I'm going to do the best that I can for you. He said, but I can't promise you anything. He goes, I've never drilled a well before where the operator, where the company man was not there. He said, to spend this kind of money to drill a well and not even be here, he goes, it's just beyond comprehension. This is all a learning experience for me. So, oh man, and they were drilling, doing a great job as far as I was concerned. I learned a lot. I talked to these guys, were great. And then one day, Greg Smith shows back up for maybe half an hour, and then he's gone. And then I don't see Greg Smith again until the very last day, towards the end. And what I mean by the end is as the drilling company was packing up. So it's just me and the drillers, just the landowner and the drillers. See, we're wildcatting, So anyway, actually, this might be a good place to stop this one. I'm not really sure what time it is, but I'm going to start on part 3, so stay tuned for some more good times.